Jim Rouse always used housing as a platform. If you can have a home, if you can stabilize your life there, that's a beginning. We can provide people with an affordable place to live, but how do we provide all those connections to opportunities? I first became involved in community organizing back in the mid-'70s. There was a block of homes that were designated for eminent domain to be torn down. What we ended up doing was really working with many buildings and tenants and tenant associations who, in some cases, were successful and were able to turn their buildings around. And it was a first step for them to kind of say, well, we can do something.
The Bronx was such a different place back in the 70s. There was a lot of building abandonment going on. There was the smell of smoke frequently at night due to fires that were taking place in the Bronx. When I got to meet Bill, it was like meeting a legendary figure who was already out there doing these things to try to stop abandonment and work with people where they lived to try to improve their housing conditions.
Enterprise was ultimately born of the conviction that if you could figure out a way to creatively leverage resources around people who were determined to revitalize their own communities, that could be something you could do at scale. Enterprise's New York program, I think, really stepped in to bring these things together. Bill Frey was in many ways possessed of all the qualities you needed to make a complex equation like the New York program work. I never saw anybody who more successfully got people to a collaborative alignment than Bill.
When Enterprise started in New York, it was Bill, basically. So it was his sense of humanity. It was his sense of generosity and kindness that created the foundation of how the office flourished and functioned. They were really looking at more comprehensively, not just about the development of affordable housing, but how do you really develop the lives of the people who live inside of those units? And that's exactly where we were as an organization. And Enterprise's ability to bring other resources in, it's created an enormous impact on all of the organizations that they worked with. And many of us have flourished.
If it were not for the type of work that Bill was doing back, in his days with Northwest Bronx, I'm absolutely convinced that the abandonment would have continued. I think the community organizing work helped set the stage for community development to kind of turn the Bronx from being a place that people were talking about as just being abandoned at the rate of 10 blocks a year to being a place that people want to live in. And that in turn is kind of put us where we are now. We're fighting for people to be able to stay here and live here comfortably, safely, and affordably.
The landscape of affordable housing has changed. Having a group like Enterprise that have been kind of the backbone helps to bring the expertise and really helps to guide many of the affordable housing developers. Things that Enterprise is doing today that I'm excited about is particularly their work on the homeless side. We have a growing homeless crisis in New York City. Greening initiatives, preservation, and looking at ways to make our buildings more energy efficient. On senior citizens initiatives and trying to ensure that our seniors are kept in affordable apartments. Enterprise has created more than 50,000 units of affordable housing throughout New York City.
Enterprise has provided a place that has allowed us to have our voices more clearly heard, both with other organizations and with the city of New York.
I think you'd be really, really hard-pressed to find anybody who's had a bigger impact on the incubating, fostering, and growing of the community development movement in New York City in the last 30 years than Bill. I think there's an entire generation of people who became more effective at what they're doing or were full-on inspired to go into or stick with the work of community development because of Bill.
Bill has been a mentor to me and has taught me that it's more than just the bricks and mortar. It's more about community development, engaging with your partners, getting everyone's collaboration and bringing people together.
You can't live in New York and not be aware of how much more need there still is. I think 30 years on, Enterprise is better positioned than ever to really lead the conversation on how do we remove the impediments to get more of this work done and really take it to the scale we know is still needed.
So I think that we take the sophistication that we've learned as an industry and we move forward. And we don't lose sight of how important it is to reconnect with communities and break down the barriers that have schools working alone, housing working alone, and health working alone, but really taking a real good look at how we can make communities work. Oftentimes when I look back and see the people I work with and how terrible the problems were, both their communities, the city, or the country, and yet it didn't stop them from wanting to make a difference. It starts with that passion to be able to understand the lives of the people that are touched by the work that you do. And I think that Enterprise should lift those people up. The next 30 years of Enterprise really can be something which shows the best of what can happen in our country. We can provide opportunity for all, in the sense that we can really provide people with decent homes. We know how to do that. I do want to say thank you to all who have been a part of this 30 years of a success story, both from me and from Enterprise. You all have made such a difference in the lives of so many people. On to the next 30 years.